Hello guys, like I said previously, I'm not done with Pretty Little Liars and I don't think I will ever be. I just remember there's something I wanted to talk about the last time and I've never did. So now it's time. There is some new stuff also because Pretty Little Liars, believe it or not, is not dead actually. It's still alive and thriving and you'll see why. PLL actually will have a reboot, and there's some things that just when you look down the memory lane, Pretty Little Liars and their spin-offs, reboots, whatever, don't usually go the right way. As we all know, the newest addition to PLL universe is currently underway. It's being filmed as we speak, as I'm recording this, and it just fills me with some kind of emotions. I just don't know if those emotions are the good kind. When you come to think about it, it should just sound a little bit insane when I'm saying it's another reboot, because PLL, believe it or not, had a couple of those and none of them went the right way. To see that and see why, we'll have to take a walk down the memory lane before we get to the newest reboot and what is wrong with it, because believe it or not, there's already some stuff that needs to be said. But when you're a veteran of this show, the words another PLL spin-off don't fill you with excitement. It just means you have to proceed with caution, because there will be something wrong with this. We've seen it many times. We've seen it with the spin-offs and the Perfectionists. There's just always something that doesn't work out with them. And then we'll talk about the spin-off, the Pretty Little Liars, the original sin, and we'll talk about what's different this time and what is wrong right away, because there, believe it or not, there are wrong things with this. And why is this, you might ask? Well, let me walk you down the history lane of PLL and the reboots. So the tale of Pretty Little Liars and their wonderful spin-offs begins in 2013 with a little show called Ravenswood. Because when you're a fan of Pretty Little Liars from 2012, 2013, it just unlocks some memories that you just wished to forget forever and ever. Starting with Ravenswood, and the first problem PLL showrunners faced was bringing supernatural into a world that is as far from supernatural as it can get. And then you add to the mix that it aired on Freeform, then ABC Family, which is just known for supernatural shows that don't even last 3 seasons. And those 3 seasons are the most painful things you can watch in your life, basically. And some even shows don't grace 10 episodes. And then they're done for life. So when you try to bring supernatural into a TV network that just doesn't get supernatural, what do you expect you can get from this? And then it's just not a surprise that Ravenswood was a big fail, isn't it? But in 2013, I was so into Pretty Little Liars, and I was just so obsessed with everything that was involved with PLL, basically, that I pushed this mentality on myself that if I just keep on watching, it might just make sense someday. And it's been like that every episode, every week, for 10 weeks. I said to myself, it just might get better. It just might. I remember saying to myself when I watched it's going to get better. It has to be, because Marlene King is involved in it and PLL is a great show. Well, now we know that Marlene basically lucked out on PLL, because everything else she touched that wasn't just the main part of Pretty Little Liars basically didn't live to the 3rd season. And most of the times, the shows that she made got cancelled after the 1st season that didn't even make it past 10 episodes. So that's saying a lot about Marlene and the fact that PLL basically just ran on fans, and that was it. But coming back to the train wreck of a TV show that was Ravenswood, we were graced with only 10 episodes, and the first one aired in connection with the season 4B premiere of Pretty Little Liars. And that episode was so out of character for them. I mean, I know it was the Halloween episode and those were always crazy, but this just seemed so forced that it almost begs the question, was it forced to make this connection with Ravenswood so the TV show could pick up, basically? And to this day, I'd still like to know the reason that they thought that Caleb would be the perfect character to bring like audience from Pretty Little Liars and make them interested in this show. But I don't think he had like the biggest fan base to like transition over to Ravenswood to make this show last. Like the premise of the show wasn't even so bad. That was like the worst thing about it. Basically, 5 people, including Caleb, find out that they are connected to the curse that plagues the whole town, and one of the girls named Miranda died in the first episode, I think. Some details are still like hazy, and the only person that could see her was Caleb. So here we have a pretty nice mystery, except the writers clearly didn't have like any experience with writing thrillers and like supernatural stuff. The show just became riddled with the shock values for the shock value that Marlene loves oh so much, as we all know from Pretty Little Liars. When a show starts already with so many things missing, and then you start watching and you feel like they didn't even explain where the characters came from, then the show is just doomed straight up from the beginning, and the only thing that can save it is a great cast. And Ravenswood, to like nobody's surprise, didn't have even a nice, great cast that it could fall back onto when it was in trouble. When I was trying to jog up my memory for this video, I read some reviews on IMDb, and some of them I really agree with. So I'm just going to read like a couple phrases for you. Watching Ravenswood is like stumbling upon a series nearing its end. The characters and focus are so narrow, and you get the feeling that you missed the important stuff that led us to this point. And then, from the start, Ravenswood makes the assumption that you know and love its characters. Good shows ease into heavy plot, allowing viewers to experience the characters as normal people with real lives, relationships, and quirks. And so Marlene's first and only adventure with Supernatural ended after 10 episodes. I say Marlene, but Jason Doherty, I think, was also involved in making this show, and we should mention him at least. And we shouldn't blame Marlene, although it's quite a big part of it. And don't get me even started on the Ouija board scene when Caleb came back to PLL. Now let's skip forward to 2019, 2 years after PLL finished airing. Now we have the newest addition to the PLL family, Pretty Little Liars, The Perfectionists, which was also in connection with another series that Sarah Shepard wrote. Make it make sense. And this time we actually see some improvement from the first venture. And this time the cast is actually promising. We have Sasha Schiffer coming back as Alison De Laurentiis, and then we have Janelle Parrish coming back as Mona Vanderwall. There's also some new promising faces, new liars you can say, like Sydney Park, Sophia Carson, Eli Brown, and even Kelly Rutherford. Overall, this show, production-wise and story-wise, was average, but it had a lot of potential to like develop in like future seasons. And in comparison, it had a lot to fall back onto, because not only you had the past characters coming back, but also some new faces that were much more recognizable than the Ravenswood cast was at that time. I think I had the biggest problem with how the show started, because Marlene did next to nothing to set up the premise of the show so it could actually make some sense. It kind of felt the same as it did when there was the 5-year time jump in PLL between 6B and 6A. Like, some things were missing, and the way they explained them was by not doing it and just like making you figure it out for yourself, or explaining it very poorly. And that was what happened with The Perfectionists. Well, this time is no different, because out of nowhere Ali decides that the Rosewood life is not for her, which is quite hilarious when all those years ago she made the liars come back to Rosewood to help her out because she insisted on staying. But I digress. My nose is itching. Ugh. She leaves her wife Emily with her kids, her biological kids, and then after a while she also decides that the married life is also not for her, so she separates from Emily, still leaving the kids with her. And then there's Mona, who's there for what? Exactly, to spy, to meddle. It doesn't make any sense because her presence changes literally next to nothing. And by that I mean she doesn't even make things worse or better because she claims she's changed now, as she always did. She just exists there and updates whoever she updated. I don't think we ever found out even. I'm sure if the show was still airing, we would have found out on season 5 because that's how Marlene operates. She waits for everybody to make theories and then she ends up going with the person that wasn't even mentioned and basically don't even exist. So people would be shocked. Shock value, which is not necessarily a bad thing because Marlene actually can write a script pretty well. Average, but well. Not like Roberto Aguirre Sacasa from Riverdale, who, believe it or not, connects to this story, and we will talk about him a little later. That's a little spoiler for you. So the question is, why didn't The Perfectionists work? Personally, I think it didn't have the same dynamic that PLL had. I didn't think they changed much, except from the interest of the characters and that it took place in college now, not in high school. Personally, I think also people counted on the other cast members to come back a little too much. From the press tour, I think I remember the most the questions that asked if the PLL cast will also feature in some episodes, and that was just a little to ask of because the show only had a couple episodes out at that time, and people already were wondering if Shay Mitchell or Lucy Hale or Troy Imbersario would appear out of nowhere. And the other reason was that people, I think, were still a little too pissed for the finale of PLL and how much sense it didn't make. I can't. Essentially, the show had no right to exist on itself because it was so connected to how PLL ended. It couldn't shake off the bad legacy and the expectations people had for the first season for it to instantly make sense when some shows don't even make sense after 5 seasons. So I think that was the main reason that The Perfectionists only had 10 episodes before it was cancelled. I think it was renewed at first and then they cancelled it. But that's just how it is with TV shows. I mean, The Society is another great example of wasted potential. And now we finally reached the original sin that is supposed to air on HBO Max in 2022. And this time we leave Marlene King in the past because somehow this joke of a showrunner that is Roberto Aguirre Sacasa got the job. And how, you might ask? I wish to know myself. I wish. I think personally it says a lot about the show when nothing makes sense. The plot, the cast doesn't want anything to do with the show. The show is literally a joke to the internet and the memes are literally better than anything in this show. And this time PLL is changing a little according to HBO because the premise that they put out says 20 years ago, a series of tragic events almost ripped the blue-collar town of Millwood apart. Now in the present day, a group of desperate teen girls, a brand new set of liars, find themselves tormented by an unknown alien and made to pay for the secret sin their parents committed 2 decades ago, as well as their own. And this time the series will follow the lives of 5 liars, not necessarily at the same age, I think, and their little problems, of course. And the cast actually seems fresh and young because we have Zaria, Malia Piles, Maya Refico, Bailey Madison, and Chandler Kinney. Knowing Roberto, who can't keep the story straight to save his life, no amount of cast or anything really will save this show from being a joke to the internet if the same thing happens that happened to Riverdale. Because there's just so much hope when you see what Roberto did with already existing characters that were written in comics, because he basically had a blueprint of the characters and he still somehow messed it up. And as much as I'm trying to be excited about it, I feel like I'm going to get Pretty Little Liars on crack with shirtless boys literally every few scenes. I think I'll still watch at least a few episodes to like get the feel which direction this show will be going into. I don't think I will be so happy with it, but I will give it a chance because I'm not gonna write it off straight from the beginning. I have to watch it to believe it. Anyway, can't wait to see shirtless dudes everywhere because that's obviously what matters more than an actual storyline. So wow, what a ride. We've reached the end. It was quite fun to explain to you what happened nearly 10 years ago, which makes me wonder if I'm a little old at the age of 21. What do you think of the spin-off? Yay or nah? Will you watch it? Will you give it a chance? Or do you think it's like doomed straight from the beginning? Tell me in the comments, please. As always, leave some kind of feedback, maybe a comment or a like. I will take everything basically. Even a view makes me happy. All of my socials are in the description below, and I will see you sometime soon. Bye bye.